The Colombian Congress included and approved an article in the anti-corruption law which, according to experts, will put a gag on the press and free speech for the benefit of public officials who cannot be investigated or questioned for their actions. On Friday, Iran achieved the first victory in Vienna by getting the European Troika to change its approach and decide to take the process on the drafts presented in the discussions on the Iranian nuclear pact. The Russian government warned about the buildup of military forces of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in Greece. Hi, this is From the South. I'm your news anchor, Diego Martin, from the Telesur studios in Havana. We begin with the news. The Colombian Congress included and approved an article in the anti-corruption law which, according to experts, will put a gag on the press and free speech for the benefit of public officials who cannot be investigated or questioned for their actions. Congress, a controversial article was approved within the anti-corruption law passed in both the Senate and the House, which would allow limiting the exercise of the press in alleged cases of corruption related to public officials. The Congress of Colombia has just approved an article that, for us, is the gag law. Who benefits from this article? Corrupt politicians, what happened with Karen Abudinen, what happened with Jennifer Arias, what has happened with so many corrupt politicians of the government coalition. That's why they want to censor the press. That's why they put this article. They are afraid that journalists investigate and denounce.
As part of tributes following the end of the military dictatorship in 1983. Several heads of state and government officials attended the
This is intended to prohibit the media from filing complaints if there is no conclusive evidence against a person or public official under investigation. The author of this article is Cesar Lordui, who belongs to the party Radical Change, an ally of the Democratic Center, the ruling party. The initial content of this article proposed imprisonment and a fine for those who, by slander and defamation, would attempt to attack or obstruct the functions of a public servant. However, before the vote, the economic and criminal penalty was eliminated. The whole root of the project is governmental. It is parties related to the government, as the final vote showed. The vote that was finally imposed in the chamber and demonstrates an authoritarian character, very close to dictatorial. Even in front of microphones, it seems otherwise, but it is a totalitarian character of the government that took the courts, that took the Congress, that took the instances of the control agencies, and now even wants to take the freedom of expression. Finally, the approved article allows the suspension or cancellation of legal status of any organization of the person or persons who have defamed or slandered the public servant or former public official or his or her family. This article was approved by 59 yes votes and 53 nay in its last debate in the House. Now we adopt everything we criticize in Colombia. The journalists cannot denounce corruption because supposedly that is fatal, so somehow they live saying that they are for a transparent country. They are for a country without corruption, for a country of freedoms, and it bothers them that they are questioned. And the sad thing is that journalism denounces and nothing happens. Justice does nothing, the president does nothing, he is indolent. For the moment, the conciliation of the texts approved by both the Senate and the Chamber is expected before going to presidential sanction, and it is there where some analysts assure that it will not pass, and if it does, it will be rejected by the Constitutional Court since it clearly violates Article 20 of the Colombian Constitution, which guarantees everyone the freedom to express their thoughts and opinions, to inform and receive truthful and impartial information. This Saturday, Uruguay's transport union condemned the unjustified excessive use of police force in the union's mobilizations. The Uruguayan Transport Workers Union condemned in a statement the police repression of a peaceful demonstration in which a participant was wounded by rubber bullets. The workers' bloc also stated that far from intimidating, these actions strengthen the will of the working class in the struggle for labor improvements. The bus services sector in this country is in conflict with company management in demand of a new collective bargaining agreement, because workers have not received a salary adjustment since 2019 when the last agreement was signed. And Peruvian justice will decide this Saturday whether former President Alberto Fujimori will go on trial on charges of forced sterilization of almost 300,000 people during his second term. According to Magistrate Rafael Martinez, during the sterilization procedures, the doctors and nurses in charge did not respect health protocols due to the pressure from the Fujimori government to achieve the goals established in the National Reproductive Health and Family Planning Program. He also pointed out that as a result of these events, human rights were violated in a health strategy that caused at least 5 deaths. During Fujimori's second term between 1995 and 2000, nearly 300,000 people were forced to undergo sterilization, including more than 272,000 women and around 204,000 men. After the tragedy in the Mexican state of Chiapas, which cost the lives of more than 50 migrants, the governments of Mexico, Guatemala, and the United States agreed to work together to face a migration crisis. The agreement is signed this Friday by the foreign ministers of Mexico, Marcelo Ebrard, and Guatemala, Pedro Brolo, along with the ambassador of the United States, Ken Salazar, establishes the creation of an immediate action group against a network of human traffickers responsible for the accident that killed at least 55 people and left more than 100 injured, most of them migrants from Guatemala. In the document, the signatory countries of the pact commit themselves to work in a coordinated manner to provide all the assistance and consular support required by the victims of the accident and their families. This mechanism is open to all the countries of the region and already has the full backup of other nations such as Ecuador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and the Dominican Republic. We'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Hi, welcome back to From the South. On Friday, Iran achieved the first victory in Vienna by getting the European Troika to change its approach and decide to take on the drafts presented in the discussions on the Iranian nuclear agreement. Within the framework of the 7th round of the talks hosted in the Austrian capital, the Persian country had already submitted to the European parties involved in the nuclear deal 2 drafts on its position and proposals regarding the removal of sanctions, which were imposed by the United States after it pulled out of the nuclear deal signed in 2015, as well as Tehran's nuclear commitments. A source revealed that the 3 European signatories to the nuclear pact, namely the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, which initially refused to go along with these drafts, have decided to conduct the negotiations on the basis of Iran's proposals. Tehran has made it clear that any negotiation requires lifting these measures. Talks resumed on November 29th with the aim of revitalizing the nuclear agreement. Meanwhile, the Special Political Committee of the United Nations General Assembly unanimously approved the permanent membership of Iran in the Scientific Committee of this organization for the study of the effects of atomic radiation. In November, after several rounds of negotiations and a draft resolution submitted by Australia, Iran's permanent representation to the United Nations in New York had announced that the Islamic Republic was able to change its position from observer to full membership in the committee, following the country's efforts to join the committee since 2011 and despite some opposition. This committee was created by the UN in 1955 to assess and report on the levels and effects of exposure to ionizing radiation. In India, groups of farmers quit protest sites on the outskirts of the capital on Saturday and returned to their homes, marking the end of their year-long demonstrations against agricultural reforms. Farmers dismantled their informal shelters at protest sites and began clearing long sections of roads around New Delhi, where they had been camping since November last year. The farmers' decision follows an announcement 3 weeks ago by Prime Minister Narendra Modi that his administration would repeal the 3 agricultural laws in the winter session of Parliament, a decision that was passed by both houses of the legislature. However, the leaders of the agrarian unions stated that they would meet again on January 15th to verify the fulfillment of their demands. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, warned about the increase of hunger in Latin America to the highest level since the year 2000. The organization's regional representative, Julio Verdeguer, pointed out that between 2014 and 2020, hunger in Latin America increased by 79%. He also pointed out that as a result of the economic crisis prompted by the COVID-19 pandemic, hunger affected almost 59.7 million people in Latin America and the Caribbean. The FAO official provided data on social inequality, highlighting a gap between men and women. In 2020, with the worsening of the crisis, 41.8% of women in the region and 32.2% of men will suffer some type of food inequality, which represents almost a 10% difference between genders. Latin America and the Caribbean urgently need to implement plans to generate an economic awakening based on integration and cooperation among the countries of the region. the government of Peru suspended Christmas gatherings due to the increase in the number of infected people. The government of Peru has forbidden Christmas and New Year's gatherings, including family visits, as part of measures ordered to contain the coronavirus pandemic, following the death on Friday of 41 people, a day toll not seen since the end of last year. The authorities had already announced last week a curfew on Saturday, December 25, 2021, and next Saturday, January 1, 2022, from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. The Peruvian Health Ministry has also reported over 1,300 new infections in the last few hours, bringing the total number of infected people to over 2,002,000, according to the Peruvian daily El Comercio. Bolivia began vaccination against COVID-19 from 5 years of age onwards at a time when the country is already facing the so-called fourth wave of the pandemic. From the city of La Paz, our correspondent Freddy Morales has the details.
The announcement of including children between 5 and 11 years old to the mass vaccination campaign was made by President Luis Arce. Our specialists from the Health Ministry have worked intensively in recent weeks to gather information, evaluate studies, and international reports, and it was decided that Sinopharm vaccine, used for children in different countries, will be used for this age group. Children began to arrive at the vaccination centers. Children do not want to stay locked up in the house. They want to go out, so parents say, so maybe they get COVID-19, and that's why the children say, we should get vaccinated. Moms are confident that this protection will allow children to begin to normalize their activities.
This morning we heard the news that they had already extended the age, and we've celebrated, the three of us and she even more, because we were waiting for her vaccine. The vast majority of us do the same for our children because we love them and we do not want anything bad to happen to them. I feel safer like this. They want to go out. So let's get all the children vaccinated so they will be more safe.
Although there is hope that the vaccination will allow the return to face-to-face classes as of February of next year, the Health Minister does not encourage such expectations. This morning I saw children at the National Health School lining up with their uniforms and their expressions saying, I want to go back to school. I want to see my friends again. To hear that is beautiful. We are not saying that vaccination will allow us to go back to school, but it's an important step. The incorporation of the new age group from 5 to 11 years old, which exceeds 1.6 million people, increases the vaccine-eligible population to more than 10 million. The country has more than 11 million inhabitants, and for the last 2 weeks has been facing the so-called fourth wave, with a constant increase in the number of new infections per day. On Wednesday, the number of infections exceeded 1,700.
Freddy Morales, Telesur, Bolivia.
We have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Russian government warned about the buildup of military forces of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in Greece. This Saturday, in declarations to the press, the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov announced the deployment through the Alexandroupolis port of NATO soldiers on its territory, which is increasing and is leading to the opening of new facilities for this organization. In view of the situation, Moscow has strengthened the modernization of its military equipment and the improvement of its offensive and defensive capabilities as part of the defense of its sovereignty. The port of Alexandroupolis is of serious strategic importance to Washington, apparently because it wants to strengthen its forces and those of NATO deployed in the Balkans and the Black Sea, very close to Russia's western flank. Tunisians protested violence against women in the capital. Dozens of Tunisians gathered in central Tunis and held a silent march carrying placards and banners protesting violence against women and calling on the government to do more to enforce laws that will protect them from domestic violence. In 2017, the Tunisian parliament adopted the much-praised law on eliminating violence against women, but the state of the matter is more difficult when not on paper. Women continue to face an uphill struggle to obtain justice and ensure their personal safety. According to a survey from the Ministry of Women, at least 47% of female citizens who took part in the study experienced domestic violence in their lifetime. These numbers have only increased with the COVID-19 pandemic. The march seeks to raise awareness on support services for survivors of domestic violence, as well as to implement campaigns and public education programs to change social attitudes that encourage or legitimate violence against women. An estimated death toll in the United States rises to 70 after tornadoes hit the central part of the country on Friday night. 5 states were affected by the strong wind gusts of a phenomenon characterized by the development of multiple simultaneous formations. The Weather Authority identified up to 30 tornadoes in 6 states across the country, with at least 70 deaths in Kentucky alone. The state's Governor Andy Beshear said from the city of Mayfield that the devastation was massive and could increase the number of lives lost. The area declared as tornado alert extended from Texas to Indiana, in an area with more than 16 million inhabitants, for which the governors requested support from the federal government to assist in the emergency.
I believe our death toll from this event will exceed 50 Kentuckians. Probably end up closer to 70 to 100 lost lives. Remember, each of these are children of God, irreplaceable to their families and to their communities. The city of Mayfield has been devastated. A roof collapse at a candle factory has resulted in mass casualties. As of 4:45 a.m., 56,854 Kentuckians are without power.
And in Serbia, thousands of people protested against new laws allowing the exploitation of local resources by foreign companies. Environmental protesters blocked roads in Serbia's capital, Belgrade, on Saturday for a third consecutive weekend to demand the government to fully abolish any potential lithium mining by the Rio Tinto and other foreign companies are interested in western Serbia. Lithium is a key component in car batteries, but environmentalists argue its excavation causes huge damages to nature. Environmental issues have come into focus recently in Serbia and other Balkan nations because of accumulated problems with air and water pollution. Protesters argue that the authorities favor the interests of foreign investors and profit over environment protection. If the Jadar project goes through, everything around us will be destroyed. Air will be polluted, plants and animals. We will have to buy bottled water. Wherever Rio Tinto operated, it left a wasteland. When they feel that the ore is spent, they leave the territory and leave it devastated. Land, air, and water won't recover in 500 or maybe 1,000 years. Wherever there is a mine, there is no life. All of Serbia is in danger because of this project and this pollution, and perhaps some other European countries too. We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at Tulsa English. You can also follow us on social media for the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Tulsa English, I'm Dio Martin. Thanks for watching.